You're listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Here are your hosts, Fran Chismar and Tom Kinezic.
This kind of brings up a whole different question, and we kind of danced around it. We've talked about it, and I know we have personal opinions, but I thought we should discuss cultivars, and this is something we could probably do a rooted discussion on cultivars and
I think
species.
we've even talked about potentially doing that as well.
Yeah. One thing that's pretty obvious. Now, my personal opinion is I'm not a fan of cultivars. Have I bought and planted cultivars or varieties? Yes, in absence of being able to find straight species or local provenance. So I kind of feel that, like Steve Castorani was saying in the rooted discussion, that many times they're a gateway drug. And if that's what turns people on to native plants, all the better, because everyone has to start somewhere. If they have success or if there's something that draws them to them and it makes them aware of a bigger issue, then that's great.
Yeah,
so,
and I think we should start even by defining the difference between a cultivar and a variety, and even a hybrid.
Yes.
Because a hybrid is when you take two slightly different species and cross them to make something completely unique.
Yes.
Where a cultivar is then asexually propagated. This is like one of those things where you have to describe something but not use the word.
No, so
it's tough.
Cultivars are propagated asexually, so they're not done from seeds. It's done from tissue culture or budding or grafting or they're genetic clones. So every single one is genetically similar. And
it should be genetically identical.
Yeah, they're genetically identical. Where a variety is a group of plants within a species that has one or more distinguishing characteristics, kind of like Magnus having flat petals, flower petals. But it will still usually produce true to seed. Not always, but most of the time you're getting true to seed. That trait is carried through the seed, which when you're doing a cultivar, let's say, and Tom did a great whiteboard ecology on this. If you're doing like Acer rubrum red sunset and you take the seed and plant it, it's only going to come up as you're going back to straight Acer rubrum.
Yeah.
So you can't keep reproducing that, where a variety you can.
And
it will carry on some of those traits.
And it may, the Acer rubrum example, it may come up looking very similar, but it's however crossed. Yeah. And the same thing with humans or rabbits or whatever you're crossing in your the Punnett squares.
Yeah.
You're going to have chances of genetic differences.
Like varieties are kind of like in humans would be having children with carrying on like red hair genetics or blue eye genetics, something like that, where it doesn't always, true to name, not every child you have is going to have that red hair, but most of the time it carries through, or most of the time it carries through in eye color. Where cultivars, my issue with cultivars is, if you were to have Pinelands Nursery all done of cultivars of Fran, you might be able to sell a lot of stuff, but you wouldn't be growing anything. Not a lot of work would be getting done. It'd be a lot of talking and not a lot of production.
A lot of talking and
complaining.
If it got a little bit too cold or a little, or your basement flooded again or something.
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. And that's
not very resilient.
No, and that's what you lose when you go to cultivars. You lose the eons of genetic diversity and that adaptation of plants to a specific area for conditions and time, and you lose all the years of evolution for that plant,
which may not be necessary if you're in a place and you only have room for one, or you only want one. Well, you're not going to have a population anyway.
No, but but besides that, some of these cultivars are chosen for specific reasons, and it might be a double flower or a larger flower or a different flower color, which can not necessarily always or to an extreme, but it can mess up migrating pollinators and wildlife if it blooms at a different time. And we've talked about that. If a lot of these arrowwood viburnum cultivars that came out of Chicagoland grows in the Midwest bloom a couple weeks differently than the arrowwood viburnum here in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. So it messes up the whole pollinators that typically would be there. Maybe it's not there for their food source isn't there. So it's kind of throwing everything off, or they may see a double flower and say, I don't recognize that. I'm not going to that plant. I don't know what that is.
And it's something Doug Townley talks about a lot. And when he addresses cultivars, it's or even nativars as they're sometimes coined.
Richard McCoy hates that term.
A lot. I think there's a bunch of people who hate it. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I don't like it either.
I'm not a fan
of it. He mentions that a lot of times if it's a similar color, basically if it looks the same as the straight species or very similar to the straight species, then the pollinator preference is quite a bit less. But when it's when it looks wildly different, like it has a double bloom or it's a completely different color or the leaves look different, that's when they found that pollinators didn't use those species as much. Generalized, or that's a generalization. I'm sure not in every case it was like that, but
no, but a lot of times these cultivars are genetic anomalies. So one example I know we've used a lot is, I think, Duraheat, Betula nigra river birch was known for taking very, very dry conditions and hot conditions, where river birch is, I think, a facultative wet. So it's typically on stream's edge, can take that alternately flooded, alternately dry conditions, like floodplain, but that plant was selected in the southern region of the United States for certain conditions. And if you try to naturalize it in normal conditions, it can't handle those conditions. So from a naturalization standpoint, or if you have a complete set of clones and you have a disease that impacts them, it's going to wipe them all out. You're not going to have where it may only take a patch of it. So in large scale restorations, I'm completely against cultivars.
And I am as well.
But, for a garden or, like I have some things I just couldn't get straight species,
and going even further with it. This is one of the things Steve Castrani from North Creek said was, and Claudia West said as well, is we're not, in the home landscape, and even with a lot of commercial plantings, you're not dealing with, it's a disturbed site. It's no longer, the connectivity is not even there. The original soil a lot of times isn't even there. So if you bring in cultivars or you bring in something from a different provenance, doesn't really matter.
But because you're dealing with the urban settings, it's not a natural setting at all. It's an urban ecology. It's completely different. So what is natural to that area? Nothing.
Where it gets a little trickier for me is when you start looking at Homegrown National Park and the idea of bringing back this connectivity. And now you have you and a patchwork of neighbors are all doing this. Well, that's where now you do have some connectivity there, and you do need to have something that's going to support the whole food web and ecosystem. So it's, I think it does get a little bit more important as that grows.
And it's, one thing I think that's important, and a lot of times I see native plant enthusiasts that try to get a lot of rare species or hard to find species, but they're not really suitable, or they don't belong in that homeland. Like I appreciate that you're trying to reinvigorate this species and have it more popular, but it's going in places that naturally it wouldn't exist in any way. So it's, those types of things I think need to be looked at as well. There's so many factors, and I think we should just go back a step, because we keep throwing the term provenance. Provenance is I guess the region or the location that the seed is born. So the provenance of a purple coneflower that we grow, we might know that we collected the seed in Burlington County, New Jersey. So that would be the provenance. So a lot of these times the cultivars, the provenance aren't easy to find or locate it. And you just don't know if they're really suitable for the conditions. Now, I'm not going to completely pan them. Like, even though my opinion, I'm not a fan, but I feel it's okay as long as you're educated and you understand what it is and what its purpose is and what you're doing. Just know what it is that you're doing. And in a lot of cases, I would rather see you plant a cultivar of a native plant than an exotic.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, it's on the right track. At least it's on the same level or getting you there. So it has its purpose.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing, and this is another, like, we could have talked about this on the growers thing. A lot of cultivars are patented. So you have to have a license to grow this thing. Now, in my days of purchasing at Princeton Nurseries, I learned that the one way around the licensing is you may have a Durahit river birch in your nursery. You can't sell it because you don't have the license. Well, you just call it Betula nigra.
Yeah.
That's the way around the licensing. And that's, I've seen this more than once, a lot of times, actually. It's like, well, it's Durahit, but I can't sell it to you as Durahit. So how many of these plants are going out maybe for restoration purposes because people think that it's straight species and it's not, and it fails. And we talked about everyone wanting a success story, and that's not going to help. So
yeah. For me, when it comes like the hard line, I guess I have with cultivars, and like, again, while I choose to plant a lot of straight species stuff, and the reason I do is because even if it's 1% better, that's still 1% better, and I have access to it. Yeah. Where I think, like we were saying, cultivars open the door to a lot of people. It's something that's a little bit more widely, or a lot more widely available when it comes to native plants. It's already hard enough to find native plants. Just do your best to find something that's as true to the species as you can, that looks similar to the species. And the science is developing. That was another thing Steve mentioned, is the science is being done right now, and that's Mount Cuba's doing it. You have Andy White, who was a graduate student in University of Vermont 5 or 6 years ago that was doing some. You have Penn State's doing some. Doug Calamy has students that are doing some of this stuff. So the science is developing now. It's not something that's been done. Yeah. And while I feel like, to me, it's pointing in the straight species, local provenance direction, it's not there yet. And you look at what Mount Cuba's done, and
their research is really,
they have some really great stuff. The grain of salt I take with it is it was done in a small area in Delaware, and that might not be the same as Kansas or even here in New Jersey, or if you're in Maine. There's differences that happen there.
It's a very controlled study from that aspect, and it's going to vary depending on where you're at in the region. So, you know, I like I said, there's a lot to think about. If you're going to use it, just educate yourself and know a little bit more about it, and
set your own. Here's the big takeaway I want to get from this: is set your own guidelines. Do the best you feel like you can. But don't hold everyone else to the same standard. Hold them to a standard where they aren't planting invasives, and maybe they're dabbling in some natives. But if you don't want to plant cultivars and your neighbor does, don't get mad at him for planting cultivars. No. Oh, you're not doing it 100%. We need to be nice to each other, and at least he's on board. He's on the train, going the right direction. Maybe he's not where you want to be, but maybe where you want to be isn't completely perfect either.
Exactly. You know, everyone has different views, and just because we view native plant ecology doesn't mean that everyone does. And I always try to remind myself, you can't control what anyone else feels. You can only control what you feel. So, you know, what I try to do is always use local provenance first, if available. If not, you know, I'll look for maybe a different plant that will suit the need. And if I can't find that, maybe I'll go to a variety. And if I can't find that, maybe I'll go to a cultivar. I kind of have like a chain that I try to exhaust, and I can't hold everyone to that standard. That's just what I do. You know, you have to come up with your own standards, and we keep saying that there's room for all of this in the conversation. So I will take that over any exotic any day. So we're all progressing. Even if someone's having the thought, that's a huge step. You know, if they're thinking about it before what they plan.
I really do think we need to do a rooted discussions on this, because we both kind of come from a similar well, we definitely come from similar background. We're sitting in the same room in the same company.
Exactly.
But I think we came to a lot of these conclusions. Well, we definitely came to conclusions separately and from separate chains of thought.
Yeah.
But I know when I've talked to Daryl about it before, he has completely different thoughts on it than I do. But we're in and that's Daryl Kobeski from Sunset Farmstead, from the last episode. But at the end of the day, we're both doing something that's better than planting an invasive and planting a non-native, or planting something that's just ecologically barren. Exactly. So we can't let perfect get in the way of good.
No, exactly. So I'm not drawing a hard line there. It's just more than anything. It's
especially when we don't know what perfect is.
Yes. Yeah. There's still the science. We talked about Sam Droege and the native or the bee inventory.
Yep.
Just that they're just really starting to know what they don't know. Same thing with native plants. A lot of this research is new, and it wasn't until the introduction of all these exotics that we really started to realize what was happening. So it's one of those things that as time progresses, we'll get more and more information. So, I mean, this is what we think we know based on the science that we see every day, but science changes. And it's, again, we could find science that supports both ends of the argument.
So hopefully people aren't upset with us because we didn't come out with a hard stance either.
And I'm not going to.
I don't think I ever would either. We have our preferences, but that doesn't mean we're exactly right. So
I mean, we choose not to sell cultivars or varieties. I think we sell one variety, and it's NRCS certified for Cape American beach grass, and it's for a lot of these projects, that's all that they will take. So that's understandable, but that's our stance, and that's okay. That's our stance, and not everyone has that stance. So.
Thank you for listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Remember to like, share, follow, and comment.